don't know about Coldwell Banker specifically. Tell us why Coldwell Banker, what makes this company so special amongst all of the real estate companies that are out there, for those who may not have heard about the company.
It's a phenomenal brand, okay? It's a company that was created in 1906 after the San Francisco earthquake. And it's a company has its motto, which is put the client's interest above all, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. And that's why I think it matches what I do as a realtor, to understand that, you know, the client's needs are the ultimate goal. Okay, not the commission, not the deal. You know, people are more important than anything in this business. That's the way you build a career. Okay, so when I was living in the U.S., the brand is widely known in the U.S. as like the top-notch brand in terms of real estate. Okay, and when I moved to Portugal, the company did not exist back then, and I was always like, okay, when Coldwell Banker comes to Portugal, I really want to work for them. And that's exactly how it happened, and I've been with the company for a couple of years, and I loved it. And I had in the last year the chance to build my own team, okay, which is very much, you know, what I like to do. We have people from different countries. I have people from Italy that live in Australia. I have people from Germany that live in the UK. I have people from Canada that live in the UK, and then Portugal. I have agents, you know, that live, you know, were born in the U.S., but live in Turkey, in South Korea, Italy, and Spain. So we're a very multicultural bunch. You know, the agent in Porto also was born in France. So this helps us a lot to understand the expat community and to help them when they come to Portugal to feel, you know, comfortable, okay? Do this transition in a way that we are all, one way or another, expats. So we've all been through the same process. So we help them in a very comprehensive, in a very, let's say, informed way of how to do things in Portugal, how to get acclimated to Portugal, how to purchase property in Portugal.
Could you please tell us a little bit about, first of all, who you are and what you are working for here?
Thanks for inviting me, Jill and Yannick. Very happy to be here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about myself. I was born in Brazil, raised in Brazil, Portuguese family in my father's side. I always had the dream of like living abroad. So once I graduated from college, a little bit of the kids growing up, we went to the U.S. I lived 20 years in the U.S. And in the U.S., I started falling in love with real estate. Okay, I had friends that were in real estate back then. They kept saying, "Ayres, you should go to real estate. You work in commercial and business, and you know, it's so related. You should give it a shot to real estate." And then when I decided to move to Portugal, which was a process that took like almost 5-6 years to conclude, I felt that I should start studying about real estate. So when I moved to Portugal, I already have a lot of information about how real estate works in the U.S., and that helped me tremendously here. Okay, when I first got here to rent a property, to purchase a property, everything I did in the beginning, it was I had a learning curve in the U.S. that helped me to get to that point. Okay.
So you're not just a normal real estate agent. You have a bit more sort of a heavy background.
Indeed.
Indeed. Just before you went into real estate, what did you do before you went into real estate?
Oh, in the U.S., I work as a director of business development, a director of sales, you know, commercial director, a bunch of different things in the U.S., always related to sales, to the sales process, and it has everything to do. It's intrinsically connected to real estate in a sense. It's selling a different product. But, and I always love real estate because it goes beyond that. You know, you have the architecture, you have the history, you have a lot of things in real estate that always fascinated me. Okay?
And even further behind that, you told us that you have a background in law. So you're also very careful about making sure that everything works out in the best way for the buyers of the properties.
Exactly. I mean, one thing that I learned, and that's valid for any commercial enterprise and company that you open, is that clients will need to be first. Okay. Yes. So having a law background helped me in a sense that I know exactly things that you can do and things that you cannot do. And when you don't have the answer, you need to research to find the right answer. So basically, In real estate, it's a very serious thing. I mean, you work in real estate. I'm helping someone to purchase a home. So every little step needs to be taken cautiously to make sure that this family doesn't get hurt in the process. And as a guy who's also an expat, an immigrant like me, who lived in different countries, it makes my task even more important in a sense, because I'm doing that for someone who's coming to Portugal, which is a country I love. So it's my way of paying it forward, okay? Help people and then, create a cycle of positivity.
Yes, that's really reassuring. So we know you're definitely a safe pair of hands with a wealth of knowledge.
So I know we've agreed this interview should be about the process of buying a house here, but I have one additional question that I'm a bit curious about, because you're not born here, you've also moved here.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in why should people consider moving to Portugal. I know when we moved here, many of my network was asking, why Portugal? Why not? why not Germany or Amsterdam or Switzerland or there's so many other options in Europe. Why Portugal?
Yes, that's a
fantastic
question, Yannick. So there's several reasons for that. Okay, I think the easiest answer I could give is the weather. Okay, but it goes beyond that. If you look, and if you're from Northern Europe, like Germany, Belgium, France, even Amsterdam, Holland, whatever, Netherlands. People look for weather when you think about Portugal, but also there's other factors. It's the only country in Southern Europe where you can actually live in English, live in a day by day and buy stuff in English. So go around and not have to learn Portuguese right away.
Yes.
Okay. Portugal has is 7 when it's EPI, which is English Proficiency Index. Okay, so very rarely you're going to find Portuguese people below 50 that does not speak some English. Okay, I have 8 agents on my team, and some of them do not speak Portuguese, even though they live here for 2 or 3 years. Okay, and they get by perfectly. If you ask them, do you have any trouble not speaking Portuguese? Minor things, I would say, very minor. Whilst if you go to our neighboring countries here, Spain or Italy or even southern France, it's not the same. So that's a major factor. Quality of life also, okay? Quality of life in Portugal, it's I would say it's a wide array of things that come into quality of life. First of all, Portuguese people are very welcoming towards foreigners, okay? 23% of Portuguese population lives abroad, in all countries. Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Switzerland, England, France. They are a very large community abroad. And these people come back and forth. So they're used to deal with the different cultures, different food, different everything. So that makes Portuguese very welcoming. Different in Spain, it's less than 3%. And we're neighbors. Less than 3% of Spanish population lives outside of Spain.
It's a massive difference.
It's a massive difference. You see in this country side by side in the Iberian Peninsula, and the numbers are so different. So that's also price, okay? If you go to drink coffee in Zurich or Amsterdam, it costs this. If you go to drink coffee in Portugal, it costs a lot less. So especially nowadays with the exponential growth that you had in remote workers, Portugal became kind of like a great destination. You have great quality of life, you have great weather, you have a modern infrastructure, our roads are amazing, you can rent or buy an apartment here and get great Wi-Fi, internet, fast. So it's a myriad of factors that help people come to Portugal and feel welcome in Portugal. Okay.
But also more than that, Portugal's government is also very welcoming. They have good visas and tax advantages for some foreigners as well.
Indeed. So, like I said, there's so many factors. Could be the NHR, okay, which is very good for Europeans. It could be the Golden Visa, which is great for Americans, Brazilians, Russians, Turks, Australians, South Africans. I've had Golden Visas done with people from all over the world, which is a great way to get European citizenship. But at the same time, it's a solid investment. Real estate in Portugal has grown, steadily in the last 8-10 years. And people feel, okay, I'm going to buy a 500,000 property, but I feel safe. That's the Golden Visa. The ones that come with HR, they feel, okay, this has great quality of life. I'm going to save in taxes, so why not? Why not Portugal? Okay.
And also, the Portugal option into Europe will give you access to the whole Schengen area.
Exactly.
once you get the visa, you can visit all the Schengen countries.
So in that sense, you see that we get a lot of retirees, okay? We get a lot of remote workers, okay? We got a lot of people that, let's say, from Brazil escaping violence. Violence in Brazil is rampant, so they want to leave Rio, they want to leave São Paulo, come here. Same thing in South Africa, sometimes the same thing in Russia. Or even an Australian that wants to give their kids a chance to be educated in Europe and travel a lot. And you're here in Portugal. I mean, you're like an hour and a half flight away from so many world-class cities. So it's a combination of factors. Okay.
And how has COVID impacted your local market here in Portugal after these last 13 and 14 months where we've had sort of a world shake in the financial environment? How have it developed up and down here in Portugal?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'll go beyond just Portugal. I'll try to get to Portugal too. But when COVID first hit, everyone's like, what's going to happen? The market's going to crash. We're going to have this, we're going to have that. And to my surprise, the first 3 months were actually people were just looking and trying to find out exactly what was going on. And then every single search engine related to real estate in the planet started going up and up and up and up because people are at home and they're looking at, at properties and non-stop. It was like kind of fun to do. And the reason for that, and then I'll go back to basics, okay? Every animal, out there, once he's threatened, he goes back to his nest, to his cave. If it's a fish, he's going to go to the coral reef and try to hide from the outside threat. The outside, yeah, exactly. Seek refuge, okay? Seek protection. And the virus was the predator in this case. So everyone started going home, okay? And then all of a sudden you had a family where the husband and wife spent 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day outside the home, okay? And then they had to spend that time inside the home. So they look at their home and like, this is not ideal. I wish I had a balcony. I wish I had a yard. I live in like in 100 square meter apartment. And look at this house here. It's 35 minutes from Lisbon. And the same thing happened in New York, Paris, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, London, everywhere. Yeah. I mean, the whole world started figuring out that I'm living in a nest. That's not a really good nest, okay? And then, we start searching for properties, and then that's the phenom that affected, everywhere, but here in Portugal too, okay? So properties are like 30, 45 minutes from Lisbon start being like really sought after by people from all over the world, which created this kind of wave, like in a reverse osmosis process, where people just start leaving the apartments and searching for properties larger, with yard, with pool, and everything. And at the same time, you had also some people that, because they're like remote workers, they start, okay, I'm in Copenhagen right now, the temperature is -5. Let's look at the weather in Lisbon right now. Oh, it's 18 degrees and it's February. Let's start looking at properties in Portugal. So we start getting waves and waves of, expats, immigrants from all over the world, especially two countries that have grown dramatically in the last, let's say, 6-7 months is United States and Canada, okay? The searches online from the United States and Canada has grown exponentially, okay?
So people are deliberately starting to question the quality of life and looking for what's better.
Yes.
Just before we sort of go into the more property-related questions, when people are starting to think of that, when they are outside of the EU, when they have to sort of decide to move to Portugal, and what sort of time frame do they need to prepare themselves to sort out, like finding a place to live, maybe buying a property, and getting into the country and sorting out all the paperwork? Is that something they manage to do in maybe some months, or is that a couple of years, or what's the process like?
It varies. I plan to move to Portugal for 6 years. Okay, I'm very methodic, very pragmatic about these things. But I think 6 months to a year is ideal. I think, everyone should research a lot. Channels like yours on YouTube give a lot of, useful information for people that are abroad and want to learn. There's many different ways, many sources of information that should be explored with some level of care. You need to filter because there's a lot of misinformation also. and that's the reason, one of the reasons I wanted to come here, because I see a lot of this information. Your channel is a great channel where you provide accurate, detailed information about any subject you guys deal with. So, but I would say 6 months to a year. You need to organize yourself if you're coming from abroad, regardless which country it is. Start researching heavily about cities, about neighborhoods, sometimes even streets, things that you like. You have to decide as a buyer, what your wants and needs, and research based on that. Okay, so that's my recommendation: 6 months to a year.
So in our limited time here, we've only been here for what, 6-7 months now, but what we've learned here is that the property market in Portugal looks different from what we come from. So there's a different level of property quality, different things to look for. What should you as a buyer consider before you start looking at properties? What's important here?
Okay, Portuguese market first. It's somewhat the real estate system is somewhat similar to the U.S. and Canada. So people that come from the U.S. and Canada kind of have the same system where theoretically you should have a buyer agent and a listing agent, or a rental agent and a listing agent, where both communicate, and then the buyer agent has access to everything. However, that's not how it works in the UK, where you came from, and I doubt it that's the way it works in Denmark as well. So it's in Australia works that way. In South Africa, I guess, works that way too. So anyhow, what do I recommend? I think it's very hard to buy property, regardless. In Australia, South Africa, Denmark, if you're not a local. Okay, so the first thing I highly recommend to do is find local assistance. The local assistant in the form of like a buyer agent does not cost anything. Okay, buyer agent costs, which is exactly the same system as in the US, are covered by the seller of the property that will pay the listing agent. The listing agent pays the buyer agent. That's how the system works. But a lot of people come here, they don't do that. They go to one of those free portals, they start seeing ads, they call the ad there, they go directly to the listing agent. So which creates a situation there in the US is called as dual agency, where the listing agent is representing both. That's highly undesirable for a buyer, because the listing agent has a strict relationship with the seller. I mean, they have a contract written where he's going to get, his commission, this and that. And then all of a sudden he's representing an outsider. He doesn't know. So if you do the right way, which is through a buyer agent, you have the buyer agent representing you. Okay, and I highly recommend to interview several of them until you find someone that you really trust. You're going to have the brokerage, lawyers representing you, because they will check all the paperwork. They'll make sure everything's fine. And you have a negotiation, partner that can negotiate this deal in the best way possible. Okay, so that's the first step, I would say. Find someone that you trust, a local guy, a buyer agent from one of the multinationals, one of the big companies that exists here, and use this guy as your local guy that's going to help you. Okay.
Can I just ask a question on that? So for those people who are coming from Europe, where the system might be slightly different than the American system, so if I'm searching on Idealista, for example, I find a listing that I'm interested in, I ring the number and I'm speaking to an agent, and it's just I'm just interested in the house. How do I know whether it's the buyer's agent, the seller's agent? How do I make that distinction?
If you communicate with any listing on Idealista or any site per se, you're communicating with the listing agent. Okay, so what I recommend to do is what I do with my clients. I said, feel free to go to Idealista, research as much as you want. Do not communicate directly with the guy. If you have a buyer agent, send everything to your buyer agent, and your buyer agent will contact the listing agent. Why? Because if you contact the listing agent directly, okay, he will consider this a dual agency. So he will not accept a buyer agent getting into this transaction, because he makes double commission.
It's too late at that point.
Too late at that point. He has to register your name, your email at that point, and it's actually the same way in the US, even though in certain states in the US, dual agency is illegal, because it's detrimental for the buyer's interest. Okay.
And what's unique about that, if I understand it correctly, is that getting in the buyer's agent doesn't cost you anything, but get you an extra layer of sort of protecting your interest.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, some people want to have their own lawyers, which is totally fine. If you
Yeah.
buy a property, have your own lawyer. However, as a buyer agent, when I represent buyers, we do have the legal department of Coldwell Banker that will also check this property, check the documents, check everything to make sure that this property is legal to be sold, which is one of the pitfalls of the Portuguese market.
So we should get onto that more.
But what then? Let's just try to finish that. But how? You said you check the legal process, but in Portugal, I've also heard that there's no sort of check of the state of the property. If there's any sort of issues with the property, there's no property surveyors to check the condition.
Those are two different things. When I talk about the legal aspects, I'm talking about this property might be an inheritance, where half the heirs want to sell, the other half doesn't want to sell.
So it doesn't have the right to sell.
Okay, so it's not sellable. It might be a divorce. It might be a property that was illegally built, or it was legally built but has a couple of annexes that are not legal. Okay, so everything like that, you have paperwork that you can check and verify. Okay, one issue that's very common here is like I get listings all the time. So people call me and say, Ayres, you're the da-da-da. We want you to list our property. And I go, okay, I'll get all the paperwork. I send to the legal department. And they say, Ayres, unfortunately, we cannot list this property because it's not legal, because this and this and this and that. And I'll go back to the owner, say, if you fix this, I'll be more than happy to list your property. But if you can't fix it, I won't be able to list. 2 weeks later, the property is only listed. Either it's a small, tiny brokerage who's desperate to get listings, or what we call feasible, which is for sale by owner. And someone, maybe a foreigner, will try to buy that property and will have issues then legalizing the property. Okay, that's a very common issue. Oh, the property survey, yes. It's something that we highly recommend, especially if you're not a local, you haven't been living here, you just moved here, to have someone checking everything in the property. Okay, it's something that is widely common in the US, it's widely common in the UK too. In here, Portugal is becoming more common as well. And I highly recommend people to get a surveyor to make sure that this house is properly built.
It's completely optional here, right?
It's not a legal requirement.
It's not mandatory.
Okay, that's good to know. It's important for people to
It's
understand.
important, especially if you buy one thing in Portugal. If you buy a new property that was built, you have a warranty by federal law of 5 years. Okay, so that protects you. But when it comes down to buying an older property that's like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, with a construction method that it's entirely different than you guys do in the UK or Denmark or the US, you might as well get someone local here, an engineer checking, making sure that everything's fine and there's no major flaws with the property that can cause you, a lot of trouble in the future.
Yeah, just one point on legacy issues with regards to properties, because I know one big thing here is sort of legacy issues. So if there's a property with some debt, for example, that's something that could potentially be an issue, so something that might need to be checked out.
That's also the lawyers will check that because if there's any debt, the property will not be legalized. Okay, the last step of the process, I'll go to that later, but the last step of the process is a deed. Okay, and the notary, which is an official, situation, he will check everything. If there's any issues with that property, he's just not going to sign off. There's no deed. That will remain like in a legal limbo until the situation is fixed. Gotcha. So that's the main concern.
So Ayres, can you tell us what are some of the common pitfalls and the issues that people should be aware of and look out for when they're looking for a property?
Yes. One of the main issues I already spoke about is paperwork issues. Okay, but beyond that, you have construction issues too. Okay, so let's say hypothetically you have this beautiful house that looks like $1 million. However, there's a pool there, and you look at all the documentation, that pool does not exist, okay? And that's a major issue. Why? Because you don't know how that pool was built. You don't know if the concrete walls, that surround the pool are really properly built. You don't know if you can even legalize that pool. And that pool might be, let's say, a liability. Let's say, hypothetically, you're in a hill, and that pool is on the edge of the hill, and there's a house right underneath you, okay? That pool collapses, and then you have the house right below you, you might, damage the house, might even have victims or something, all because there's a pool that is constructed, illegally. So that's a major issue. Also, Very common here. You have this house and then they start building, side houses here that none of them are legal, okay? So you're gonna have to legalize this house if possible. If it's not possible, you're gonna have to tear it down, and that's cost, okay? So all of a sudden you bought this beautiful house, which is a 3-bedroom with 3 little houses, a 2-bedroom each, and you say, well, this is perfect for my family. But in the end, you end up with a 3-bedroom house and everything else has to be torn down, okay?
And can I ask, what is the process of people, because there's a lot, as you said, there's a lot of properties that may not have been approved or pools, etc. Is it policed? I mean, how do the local authorities find out about illegal pools or illegal housing? How does that work?
Sometimes they don't.
Okay.
So it's there, it's been there for 10 years,
Yeah.
5, 10 years, 12
Okay.
years, 15 years, and nobody does until you actually sell the property.
Right.
Once you sell the property, then you have all the paperwork being totally examined, and that's when you have issues. Okay, some people say, oh yeah, this pool has been here for 10 years, nothing happened. Okay, nothing happened, but it might happen. You never know what's going to happen. Okay, and that varies from chamber to chamber. The chamber is the one who regulates all that, the local chamber in whatever village or city you live in or town. And it varies from one to another. Some of them are very easy, okay, to legalize stuff. So you go there, and maybe 3-4 months you have that legal. And some of them it's just impossible. It might take 2, 3, 4 years, and you never legalize that, extra guest house that you have, or the pool, or whatever you built in that property.
One of the big issues here in Portugal is unfortunately mold or damp. So can you tell us some more about that, and how realistically, in your own experience, how big of a problem is this?
It's big, okay. In a sense that, especially if you buy, Portugal is an old country, okay? Lisbon is actually older than Rome, okay? Which a lot of people don't know that, but it is. So when you're buying like an older house, built with different methods of construction, okay? Sometimes that house was built in a street where there's a bigger building right now blocking the sun, and it just becomes humid, and you have mold, and you have issues related to dampness, like you said, okay? So it's something that needs to be, that's why you need a surveyor to do that, to check that, okay? Check for mold. The energy certificate is a great way to check that, because if it's a B or an A, it's a newer property, tend to have proper insulation, tend to have proper mechanisms to prevent mold. But you also need to look for like sun exposure, how the sun crosses that house, like sunset to, sunrise to sunset, how it goes, because sun is very important, not just in Portugal, all over Europe. You always need to concentrate how the sun, goes into this house. What kind of line the sun crosses in this house? Okay, this is very, very important to avoid mold. Also, there's a myth here also, which is, properties in Portugal, they have no insulation, they're old, they have stone, like they're built 100 years ago, and this and that. It's a matter of choice, okay? So if you have a buyer agent, you can specify, okay, I want a house, I want a 3-bedroom house, I want to have AC, I want to have heating system, I want to have everything you want in that house, and your buyer agent will find that for you. Okay, but if you want a nice Pombaline building, that looks fantastic, that goes on Instagram and it looks like $1 million, and you're gonna get lots of likes. Sometimes you have to understand that you're dealing with construction that it's 100 years old. So construction methods back then were not the same as today. So you might deal with mold. Okay, you might deal with let's say not proper heating during winter time. You might deal with electricity issues. So you're drying your hair, and your husband is doing a toast in the morning, and then the lights go down.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's an older property with older features. And is it possible to get one of those properties that look like could be New York or Boston or LA or London? Yes, but it costs a lot. They're called a retrofit, where the facade remains the same, But the back, it's all modern and sometimes voice controlled. Alexa, I want 22 degrees and the temperature will be 22 degrees. So they do exist, but they cost a lot.
Pretty penny.
Okay.
But also what's so unique, especially Lisbon, is this is one of the most kept cities because it survived over Second World War, when many cities across Europe was very damaged, and Lisbon didn't have to be rebuilt in the same way. So you have so many thousands of properties that are much older than you would find in the rest of Europe, according to my knowledge and my exposure to the property markets across Europe.
You're absolutely correct. And not just that, I mean, it's like I said, it's a very old city, so you have construction here that have been beautifully rebuilt that look fantastic, and people fall in love with that because the architecture is very unique. Okay, when you say Pombalin style, I could talk here for hours about that. But it was the whole city was rebuilt in 1755, and was rebuilt in a sense that it was seismic, protected. And it was a style that, during 100 and, close almost 200 years, it was the Lisbon style, which people fall in love with, okay? Which the Gaiola Pombalina, and I highly recommend people to research that, people that like architecture, because it's fantastic. It's very unique to Portugal. Okay?
So if people are finding houses here and it's not exactly like that perfect house, they want to do some renovations. How easy, how hard is that in Portugal with permissions and finding construction companies and stuff like that?
I think actually renovations, are not that complicated in Portugal, as long as you get a local professional and someone that you can trust, someone that again, every professional, anyone gets in Portugal, interview them. Right now you can do via Zoom, ask the guy questions, ask him to show previous project that he's done, talk to someone who hired this guy in the past as a contractor and builder, and make sure he's fine. If he's fine, he will know all the ins and outs of construction. He will know how to renovate this property properly, and he will guide you through the process. Okay, building in Portugal is not easy. Okay, renovating, I think it's a lot easier than building. Okay, because everything that is internal, I mean, you also need permits and everything, but it's a lot easier to approve than if you start building from scratch. Okay.
And how about if you, as us expats, fall in love with something that's picture perfect, but is not yet built, it's in the process of being built, so it's off plan? How should you go about that? Is that okay or is it dangerous? Or?
No, I think it's okay. I think there's a lot of great developers in Portugal right now, companies, not just from Portugal. Portugal has a bunch of them, but also from Denmark, from Switzerland, from Germany, from Spain, from France, from the UK, that come to Portugal to build because it's a thriving real estate market. Okay, so I don't see any issues buying from any of these companies. They have business all over the world. They're very solid companies that build well. I mean, the mid to luxury market in Portugal has been thriving for quite a while. So they tend to compete against each other and raise the standards when it comes to finishings, details and things like that. So it's a safe market to buy developments in Portugal. I would say it's something that I've been selling for years, and I never had any issues with any of it.
And what about when you find a property? If you should talk about property valuation, is that how do you know that if you see a house that the bank is happy with the price and the property is worth that? Is there like a valuation process here that is regulated by any way?
Okay, so let me explain. In the US, there's something called MLS, which is multi-listing system, where you have all the properties there, so you can look at trends, you can look at all the comps around you, how much they're worth. You can go to Zillow and so many tools in the US where you can find out what the property price is. In Portugal, we're still in the initial steps of that. At Coldwell Banker, we have a great tool to help us to do that. So once we get, it's another reason to get a buy agent, because the buy agent can have access to that and tell you, okay, this property, it's listed for 500, but in reality, it's worth 450. So don't go higher than 450 in this property. Or it's listed at 500, but actually in my report here, it should be 525. So this is a great property for you to buy. So as a buy agent, we do that. Okay, because we have information, in our software that gives the access to everything that has been sold, everything that has been negotiated on that particular location, so we can create enough information, create enough reports so our clients can be totally informed and whether they're buying for, high price, low price, mid, if the listing price is correct or not, okay?
And do the banks have any additional checks on that, or how does that work?
That's an excellent question. Another layer of protection that you can add as a foreign buyer is, let's say hypothetically, you want to buy a property for 500,000, okay? And you do have the cash, the 500,000, okay? However, you want to have an additional layer of protection. So you just, you know what, I'm gonna pay 450 and I'm gonna finance 50,000. Why? Because then the bank becomes your partner. When the bank is local, the bank has an appraiser, so you don't have to hire an appraiser. They already have one. They go there to do the evaluation. And then you have a total report, because banks do not like to loan money if the property is not safe. So you as a foreigner will have a bank, a local bank, as your partner. I use the example 450-50, it might be 400 and 100, 250-250, whatever. Once you have a bank as your partner, you have another additional layer of protection.
So Ayres, when you're coming here and you want to find a property, I know there are certain portals that you can go to, but how do you go about that process? What portals to use? How do I find the property? How do I go about that?
There's a lot of very good portals here. Okay, the lisbon, Casa Sapa. There's a bunch of them where you can find properties. International ones like Renovations and Living Globally, a bunch of them. However, every one of them, okay, and most of them actually, are free platforms. So it's hard to filter what's being listed by a reputable brokerage and what's listed for a small brokerage that has no listing and is trying to get business going. And a very common complaint that we get from clients that approach us is that they send emails and they never get replies, okay? Because sometimes for a listing agent, he feels the foreigner as I don't know if this guy's gonna come or not. I don't speak English, so I don't feel comfortable replying this email. I'd much rather sell this property to a local guy and this and that, so they don't reply. So once more, if you have a buying agent, he will be able to go all the listings that you selected. I would highly recommend to use the list as a search tool, select properties, send to your buyer agent, have him filtering, okay, this is okay, this is not okay, this is, has been sold 6 months ago and somehow they kept the ad going here just as a clickbait to get more clicks. And he will be able to filter that out, okay, for you.